I'm Felici. I'm a PhD student back in Argentina, working at the Unibioma Institute back in Rio Negro, Bariloche. I work for CONICET, and I'm doing my PhD at the Universidad Nacional Comahue. And my advisors are Juan Manuel Morales, now at Glasgow University in Scotland, and Juan Manuel Morales. First of all, thank you for coming. Thank you for inviting me and giving me the possibility of giving this talk.
So a quick question: the Universidad Nacional Comahue, is it actually in Bariloche?
Yeah. Yes, it's a regional university, so it many states. So yeah, the name of the talk is on the use of deep learning techniques for decoding animal movement data, and it's tales of a PhD student, and you'll be able to tell why. So I work at the quantitative ecology group here. This is called CONICET Patagonia Norte, which is where our offices are. And what we do in this group is we try to understand ecological processes using models. So one day my advisor came to me, said, okay, we have a problem. This is the problem. We've been tracking these sheep. We put them collars. These collars have accelerometers and magnetometers. I want to know what they're doing. That's really useful information for us in the group, not only for other things that I'm doing in my PhD, but for other also PhD students and researchers that want to work with this data. And we haven't solved it yet. We want to find a function that maps these two, the signals that come out of these colors, to different behaviors. So we have 6 signals that come out of these colors. 3 are from the accelerometer with 3 different axes, and 3 are a magnetometer with 3 different axes. I want a function that can map all of this to different behaviors like foraging, walking, resting. So this is the problem. Find that. How would you solve it? Well, my advisor came to me and said, how would you do it?
Sorry, can you just explain? I understand accelerometer. What does the magnetometer allow you to get? Magnetic field?
Orientation.
On the magnetic field?
Yeah, that's correct. So how would you? Me, fresh PhD student, almost freak out. I didn't know how to do it. So that made me review my toolbox. Because one day I was always trying to, as I was studying, doing my undergrad and doing some more research projects, as I was progressing through my career, I never really understood why people were doing things in a given way. Sometimes, well, like once I asked my advisor why, and he said something like this. Of course, not entirely, he said it in Spanish. But something like this. He said, people tend to use the same hammer from every problem. So that people have this set of tools, and they take the problem, and they will use it. They will usually use those tools. So I want to take you through a little bit of a trip by reviewing the toolbox that I had at the time, and my understanding of those tools, and why I chose the tool that I chose. This is me when I was studying in Bariloche, taking a hike trip in Bariloche. I want to do something similar. So the first thing that I was taught, like many young scientists, I'm a biologist by training, because I was learning about the natural world. People introduced me to this frequency statistics, which didn't make sense at the beginning, but at the end I understood that the problem is that we gather some data, or we make some experiments, and we have the problem that there's some randomness in that data. So we see a result like this, super simple, but these two seem to be different. Sort of the question that you ask with frequency statistics tends to be, is this different to run on this? So for things like t-test and ANOVA tests and things. That's okay. I use this tool for many small projects, studying. Then I got introduced to these mathematical models using biology. And you're writing like this, like prey, like rabbits and wolves and things like this. We'll describe the system with some mathematical models, and then they will analyze some conditions, try to make some inference or reach some conclusions, and it was good as well. And then I got introduced to simulation models. One of the first thing that I got to use in a real project, which didn't make sense to begin either. So I got introduced to the concept of agent-based modeling. Was given this book by Railsback and Grimm, famous one. I got introduced to NetLogo. Then there were some libraries in Julia and Python that could do this type of models. And the whole idea was us trying to make a real enough virtual world to validate this world that we created against what we observed, and will also inform the parameters of these models with data, and that will allow us to run some experiments that we can probably not make in real life and make some conclusions. This is something that we are doing because we're interested in one of the things that we're interested about is the relationship between sheep movement, land use, and the spread of a parasite that is called Bacteria hepatica, back in Argentina. So we're building this ABM to validate this model that we're building. Is this data will come out of the decoding of this accelerometer and magnetometer signals. And then I got introduced to data-driven probabilistic models. This is one of the things that I loved, one of my favorite ways of modeling things. And the whole idea was we had many models that many mathematical biologists or physicists developed for trying to understand a biological system, and the idea was to sort of bring them together with the data that we found. So say we have this simple data set, really easy. We have to choose a model, say a linear regression, a simple one, a multiple one. We can choose like a polynomial one. So say we chose a simple linear regression. Of course, these are two parameters of this model. You could simply have one parameter, like 1 point estimate of those values. And each particular value of these parameters will give something like a different model configuration. So we got introduced to this idea that we define a model, we have data, we use Bayes' theorem, and we find distributions of parameters for distributions of values for these parameters. So something like this, we'll feed this model to data. Each of these lines is a different model configuration. But this sort of, before we use a linear model. So we have, this is the same data set, it's another data set. But given the same data set, we could choose many different models. These are higher order polynomials. And why would we choose like a linear one and not another one? I was a little bit confused. For me, one of the main things that I want to understand about science is how we do science, how should we do it, how people do it. And this was mind-boggling to me. So this is one of the big questions. So luckily I got introduced to the apparel, big guy, Turing Award winner, who wrote many books on what it's called causal inference. And even though this theory allows you to evaluate integration and causal relationships, for me it gave me a framework for how to define them all. We have a target value, features, how those features are related, using something that is called DAG, or directed acyclic graph. And this is, cannot see it pretty well, but it's just the shape of function. Second idea was, once you have your variables and how, like, which one affects which one, you have to decide how do they affect each other. So you have just functions for each of these arrows, and all of these decisions have to be informed by theory that you know, in the case of the biological systems that you're trying to understand. So this was one of my first big projects. We had stink bugs, we had soybean crops. We analyzed the whole ecological system, the problem, and so on. We defined sort of directed acyclic graph. How are the variables related? We chose, and with that, we described the mathematics of it. This is super simple. This is just linear models, but we chose which functions relate some variables, like using a Poisson function and a binomial inspired on how the system works.
Sorry,
Yeah.
we actually, no, because you start putting letters and mathematical symbols. Did we follow you on that? Or you just-
This is more, yeah, I mean, I want to transmit the idea of, okay, we have I can tell you.
No, maybe it's not
reasons.
important. I just want to know, there is lots here that, you know.
No, I mean, the whole idea is, this is just a simple linear model, and there are some differences on, for example, in this case, how the migration, the soybean crops works, but the main idea I want to transmit is, we have some theory about the system. With that theory, we make some decisions on how we write the mathematical model, and we get some outcomes. And the outcomes that we got is, we got a really good forecasting model. And since this was a biologically inspired model and fit to data, could make some conclusions. And we found some interesting things like the observation error, that people, when they go sample this system, it's bigger than they expected. And we found we could run some simulations to find how the uncertainty in the system varies as a function of sample size. So this was good. We had a model, it's biologically inspired, it's informed with data, that allowed us to solve the problem that we were trying to solve, which was how do we forecast the system, and at the same time allowed us to make some inferences about how the system works, or the observation process of the system. First paper, we're happy about it, really good. But it's sort of, I mean, I wasn't satisfied with this because I mean, even though we took some biologically informed decisions, every decision implies some loss. So this begs the question: did we choose the right models? What if we chose a different model? Of course, you have to finish your work, you have to publish it, and you're not able to try every possible model, of course. So trying to answer this question, I got into the writings of this guy called Michael Wittenburt, an absolute chad. He calls himself a freelance mercenary gentleman statistician. I call him the cowboy of academia. Super interesting. He did a PhD in experimental physics, then he did a few postdocs, and that's where he got involved in statistics. Then he did a second PhD to and statistics even deeper. And now he sort of a freelance writer and podcaster and researcher. He has this podcast, talks about statistics, modeling in general. It's very good. And he presents the problem that I'm trying to understand like this. He says, okay, we have a phenomenon that we're trying to understand. That phenomenon lives in an environment. We can probe this phenomenon with our tools to observe the system. And that would define something, that would define what he calls, or it's called, a data generating process. That's sort of the underlying model that will generate all the data we can then observe. And he presents the problem like this. He says, we have P is the whole possible set of models that we could possibly define, but there's also, since this is not feasible, he defines a small world of models that you can practically try to apply in a sensible time window. And this is the true data generating process, which is sort of, you can think about it like the true model, the true underlying model. And ideally, we're looking for this true underlying process. And ideally, the different models that we find will include the true. But most likely, we're not here. It's likely it's really hard to find the right model of a given system. It takes a lot of time, many decades. So in the time frame of a project from a PhD student or researcher in a few years, we're in this situation where all the models that you could define do not include the true data generating process. And this to me was clearly a problem. But then someone asked, should we look for the true model? Because the underlying idea of me at the time was, if you have a true model, you will make the best predictions. But then I was watching, this is Richard McElrath, he's an anthropologist working at the Max Planck Institute. I was watching his lectures on YouTube. He talks about this. He says, there was this geocentric model in the 2nd century, which was clearly wrong. The Earth was at the center of the solar system, and we now know more than almost 2,000 years that looks more like this. This is wrong as well. But he was saying this system, this completely wrong model was extremely useful for more than 1,000 years. People were using it and making extremely accurate predictions. So what about this? How could we have an extremely, completely wrong model and sit and be extremely useful? So this next is there's going to be a lot of fun. So why was this model so useful? I came across to this paper by Galit Shmueli. It talks about models that you build to explain how a system works, and models that you build to predict the behavior of a system. And right at the end, she has a proof that says, sometimes the wrong model can make better predictions than the true one. Sense at all. She has a theorem, she proves it, but one way of thinking about it, one small case is if the data you have is super noisy, or features that are the real ones, the real variables that affect the system, you can only measure them with, for example, a lot of error. You can use proxies, which will yield completely wrong model, but will make better predictions. So we don't need the true model. That's a big relief. In this case, for this problem, I want to somehow predict the behavior of sheep, given the signals.
You don't need a model to make
Yeah,
claim, which is
Yeah.
understanding, you need it.
completely, but this is the nature of the problem, of my problem. I want to find a function that maps this accelerometer and magnetometer signals to behaviors, because we need the data, but we're not interested in explaining how the shape of the accelerometer data will be mapped to the behaviors. So here was I, after reviewing a whole toolbox, and there's like a secret one, you can probably tell which one it is from the title, but at the time,
It's not overlapping data. So if are you implying that simulation model is not overlapping the data driven from the model, or is what they do?
they do somehow to separate this for say, okay, simulation models, think of them like you build a simulation with code and you run those simulations. Of course, you can use a probabilistic model and you can do this in a data-driven way, so it overlaps.
So it's underneath there, they are
They are also, yes. So at the time, what made more sense is using these Bayesian models, data-driven probabilistic models. But this was already attempted by one of the students of our groups, Suarez, who's now a postdoc in Canada. She used this hidden market model to try to decode these signals, look at the behaviors. So the idea of the hidden market model is that you have underlying states, have transitions between those states, and you have observations that a given observation can come from any of those states. So she built this model, she fitted it to data, but the problem is that, I mean, it was a great model, but she got something close to 85% accuracy when decoding this data, and the other problem was that this took 6 months to classify the whole data set, which was a little bit too much for us. So for me, it was how can I improve this? Should I choose a different model? So you had to make some decisions when she chose the model, but at the same time, when I was reading this, I was reading her paper, and data section said that as features for this hidden market model, use the log of the mean of beta. Beta is a derived quantity from the accelerometer data. The pitch, the mean of the pitch. The pitch tells you the head of the ship is up or down, and the logarithm of the standard deviation of the pitch. And this is sort of final decision. You can use different statistics. She did compute a few, she did do an exploration to see which statistics will be the most informative. At the end, this implies decision, that implies a lot. So I had 2 options. I could choose a different model, or I could choose a different set of features to model this. At the time, I got my hands into this book, really gentle introduction for information theory, gentle enough for a biologist to be able to read it. I got this question stuck in my head: where is the information? This is 3 of those signals. And where is it? Because she aggregated this is 40 Hertz data. She aggregated all the values within 1 second and took those statistics. So why was in a second? Maybe it was in a 3-second window, or maybe it's in combinations of these features. How do you know? Where is the information stored? We have some information about that is stored in the signals, and we're going to use the most informative combinations of the signals or statistics from the signals to inform for us to be able to predict or classify the behaviors. And this is like this sort of, you have a big search space when you want to solve this problem, thinking it like this. You have some sort of Cartesian product of the possible functions or models that you could define with all the possible feature engineering ways in which you could do feature engineering. So I thought about this book. Jorge Luis Borges is a big guy, Argentinian writer. It's the story of a Chinese guy who's a spy, a German spy in London. But this story also has an underlying story. And the story sort of says that every time you take a decision, like a new path opens up, but at the same time, every time a path opens up, there's like a parallel world where you took the other decision and you can take other decisions. And this is sort of like a tale for a PhD student trying to solve this problem. I mean, I have maybe like a 1-year window because I have to work on other things. And if I think all the possible routes I would have taken, a given model, a given feature engineering, I mean, given so many paths, probably the one that I take is not going to be the best. So this is certainly a problem. And this brings the big reveal. I want to sort of explain why I chose to use neural networks. I was also exposed to the hype of deep learning at the time, but I didn't really get it. So I began to study to decide if I was going to use this big new AI thing to try to solve this problem. And the first thing that I found that why is there like such a big fuss with neural networks? It all sort of began in the 89 with this paper that proved that even neural network with some characteristics are universal function approximators. So we have some inputs, we have some outputs. We know how to define function. The neural network will explore the space and find function that better makes this mapping given a loss function that you define. And the other thing that I found is this is the diagram of a really famous neural network. It's called a convolutional neural network. I was sorts of paying a lot of attention about this part. It said feature learning. What is feature learning? And the whole thing was that you didn't have to define the function. The function will be found by the neural network. But at the same time, you didn't have to do any feature engineering because this was also a problem in traditional machine learning models. You had to do the feature engineering. And doing the feature engineering meant that you had to make some decisions and some loss, and you probably didn't took the best one. So this was the second big thing about neural networks. It's not only that you will find a function, it's that featuring the learning of the features, the most informative features, it's inside of the neural network. So when you run the optimization process to find function, you'll also find the combination of features that will be most informative. So this is like a big thing. I mean, I don't have to take any of this. I mean, we're not good at doing this. We're time bounded. I have a lot of things to do. I have many years. I don't have to explore all of this space. I can use machine. It is super fast, super efficient. The machine can explore this space, make a Cartesian product between functions and feature engineering techniques. Give me the best one. And there was another thing. I was paying attention to this researcher. This is Jan LeCun, one of the fathers of deep learning. And I only go into Facebook because he publishes this long writings there. And sort of wrote something to explain why, talking about speech recognition, computer vision, and natural language, and why did it fail before. And he says researchers in the 2000s we're obsessed with accurate representations of uncertainty. This gave to a lot of probabilistic generative models, such as hidden Markov models, in that the PhD student in the group tried, micro-random fields, constellation models, and so on. And he says, none of this was concerned with the problem of learning. We just saw features were assumed to be given, and the structure of the graphical model with its Latin variables, how they are related to each other, was assumed to be given. So this is the problem. It's sort of describing the problem that I found when I saw Sophia's work. It had to define the graphical model of the hidden Markov model. Its latent variables was assumed to be given. The features were assumed to be given, and so on. And he says this thing that I didn't really get at the time. He says, solving the problem of learning hierarchical representations and complex functional dependencies was much more important. And this is the thing with learning hierarchical representations. It turns out that these are layers in the neural network. Deep learning is known, it's called deep because it has many layers in between. And you could ask, why does it have so many layers? And one of the things is that this convolution layer, this one will be the one that will find the features, will scan, it has something that is called filters. Some will have 64 filters. All of those will try to pick up different patterns. But the thing is that when you use these neural networks, you don't only have one convolution, that is, you don't only have one layer that is trying to find features, you have many of these layers. And the whole idea is that the first combinations that you can make, something like accelerometer data, mean or standard deviation, and so on, that is not important enough. You have to make take some right quantities, first layer, but then you have to compute other things from the results of first layer. So everything clicked. I said, okay, I'm going to adapt this neural network, this convolutional neural network. I'm going to fit the whole signal. I'm going to let the neural network find the function and find the features in a hierarchical way that are the most informative. And I will modify the neural network for it to output a given behavior. So I launch my Google Colab, run this model, get straight 94% accuracy. And it took 0.5 seconds to decode 1 hour of data, which meant that in one day we could get our full data set classified, which is a great improvement, both in terms of accuracy and the time that it took. Remember that it took, with the hidden Markov model, we calculated it will take 6 months. Against.
How do you calculate the accuracy? Because you know what they are doing. It's a comparison with the actual behavior.
Yeah, so the idea is that there's different subfields or techniques in deep learning. This is called the approach that I took is called supervised learning. The idea is that you feed some inputs and some outputs, sort of here's the input, here's the answer. Learn the patterns that you have to learn, and you'll keep even data set outside, and then you'll say, okay, you sort of take a test and say, okay.
I do not need all the debate, but how do you know it is accurate? So the classification is accurate. Yeah,
so it makes a prediction that it hasn't seen before. You test that against data you have, and you use a function that will compute how many times the prediction was accurate. So this is the whole idea of when you try to evaluate a forecasting or predictive model, you train in a subset of data, make predictions about another subset of data. If you have the answers, you will compare what are the real answers to what the model predicted. And this is the same idea. Yeah, you have testing data, training splits, and you test on the test split, and you simply compute how many times the percentage of times of the answer was correct. So big thing. I was extremely happy. this was me, and after the chat, partying with the boys, ready to start writing my paper. Super happy that I solved the problem. But there was something lurking behind. It's what is called the machine learning reproducibility crisis. So since I wanted to make sure that this was a sort of way to good results, it couldn't be true or may not be true. From Princeton University, and it was like a paper from the organizers came out that were analyzing this big hype in neural networks, because I heard about this case of these researchers saying that their neural networks could detect cancer in a lung, but at the end they realized that the neural network was just looking at a single pixel and not looking at the lungs at all. So this paper analyzed 17 fields and 329 papers, and concludes that in many cases it leads to wild optimistic conclusions, and explains what are the mistakes leading to these over-optimistic results. One of those is not doing the train and test split, some things on how you can get the features and so on. So just to be sure, let's take out this, make sure that I'm not making those mistakes. I was. So after correcting those mistakes, my performance drops from 94% to 60%. It's a big problem. Yeah, I mean, it's more than random, so it's better than random, of course. We were trying on 3 different behaviors, so random would be 30%, so it's much better, but of course not good enough. So this is what I'm now. I'm still working on this problem, having a few meetings with people who have been working with this type of models for a long time, and this is a few things that we're doing now. We're gathering more data. These models are really intense. We're trying to capture temporal information in the signals, because what we were doing, I didn't get into details, we're feeding 5 seconds of the signal and asking the model to classify the behavior only given those 5 seconds.
What is the scale of the data set? 1,000 millipoint, 10,000
It's 40 hertz of data, and we have 1 data. So 40 times 60, 60, and 60. Yeah, a lot. But data is useful for us to train is the data that we have labeled, and labeling is a super expensive process because we have to sit down. What we did is we went to field to videotape this chip, the colors, and then we have to sit down and watch the videos and say, okay, the chip, this time we have all the data from the signals. We've had to fill out the Excel file saying, okay, the chip here is doing this, the chip here is doing this. And the other thing that we're doing, I was saying, is trying to capture temporal information, because we're asking the model just to make classification given a 5-second window. And if you think about this, is losing a lot of information, because maybe the ship will be laying down in the ground for 5 hours. And if you can capture that, you'll most likely make a classification, because you sort of think, okay, the ship is laying down 5 hours, we're going to stay on the floor. I will predict that it's still laying on the floor. And the other thing is one thing that is called hyperparameter optimization. These neural networks are not plug and play. There's many parameters that you have to choose, something like things like the amount of filters, the amount of functions to pick up the features, layers. So this is me, and gathering more data. This is my partner helping with the filming of the ship. The way we're attempting to capture temporal information. doing in ChatGPT, all the models are based on this architecture and transformer. And the idea is that these models are sequence models. So what we're doing is instead of fitting a single 5-second window, we're fitting a whole sequence of those windows. And this transformer will try to pick up temporal information in this, and we'll output a whole sequence of behaviors. And this is the hyperparameters that we're trying to optimize, and filters, filter size, and number of attention heads. And so to conclude, these ideas are really good. I mean, in some problems, we don't really need to define the model ourselves. We don't have to go through this lengthy process of trying to make a sensible mathematical model, fit it to data, doing a proper fit to data. Piece of basic model, for example, you have to run Hamiltonian Monte Carlo, you have to do a lot of things to make sure that the mathematical chains, like the optimization was okay. But also, I mean, this is a great idea, but we have to be aware of over-optimistic results, but also keep in mind that we're just in the dawn of neural networks. They began to work, so to speak, 10 years ago. We made to try to solve this problem that this model has. So thank you for listening. Yeah, the idea is that break down really fast. For example, you can probabilistic model, you have a model that works sort of robustly against data that's similar but not really the same. So that's the idea. When you train a neural network, for example, train this vision model, this convolutional neural network, recognize signals sheep, to try to feed it signals of, say, cows. It won't work really well. I mean, it's not something you can generalize. So there's a lot of research trying to generalize these models.
But if you have more sheep before we year, then will be okay.
Yes. Yes. I mean, it's sort of, I mean, if it's the same shape in the same conditions, you can make sure that, because these neural networks, what they do, this optimization process find function, they are extremely lazy. They will find first local minimal, they will find that it's good enough, will probably stay there. The optimizers that they use to explore this space of possible functions is still developing. So they'll probably find a function that works good enough for the shit that you have, that behaved in a way that you recorded with the data set, but it's not something that will try to pick up more general patterns of how this should move. It's really specific to the data set that you have in hand. So that's the idea of being brittle.
And so you mentioned there was a data leakage.
Yes.
So what's that?
Data leakage, the idea is that you have these training test splits. What you want to do is you want to isolate the information that it's in the training set from the information that it's in the test set. Because these neural networks, they will memorize a lot of things, and if you give it if you somehow leak some information from the test set into the training set, it will sort of learn what is in the test set before it sees it. So it's not really, I mean, it will say that when you test it in the testing set, it will be really good, but it's because the neural network has seen that data before.
So that's cheating.
That's exactly.
How is it that people actually were doing some information about the test? Isn't that standard train and then test?
Yeah, I mean, this is, I mean, it's called a crisis because many papers, for example, are not even doing the training and splits test, but basically not having a proper test of how your model works. But the thing is that there's many ways in which you can leak this information without knowing. One of those is, for example, you have to, these neural networks, if you give them different features, those features have to be in the same scale. Because of how the optimizer works, you have like a one scale, say, no, like the features on the order of thousands and the other feature on the other order of like from -1 to 1. Like one feature goes from -1,000 to 1,000, and the other one goes from. Yeah, I mean, you have different features. Those features have to be on the same scale. So you have to normalize them. And if you want to normalize them, you have to do the minimum. Just, okay, I have data sets, let's take the minimum max, compute them, have features normalized,
The whole data.
of the whole data, and you then do the tests and training splits. So you leak some information, you use them, yeah.
But you know, I mean, I not literally say 20% test, 8% let's the 20% test, you've got nowhere near the only input. No, you can probably normalize it.
Sorry to do it.
Yeah, that seems insane to people I'm doing that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a new field, a lot of hype, you can get really good results straight away. There's not much checking of the underlying methodologies.
If I understood correctly, the idea that there's 3 behavioral characteristics that the sheep have.
Yeah, we have a few more, but we chose to try to decode mainly 3 ones, which is resting, eating, or walking.
And then
Yeah.
so then you label something as
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and with the 6 months of the hidden markup model, was that 6 months? I assume.
No, that's 6 months in a chip computer from my university.
Surely not continuously. You can't continuously run a laptop.
Yeah. I mean, it's sort of the limitations that we had at the time. We didn't have a cluster available, at least in my group. We had a computer, a CPU that was a little bit better, but of course, you can run it for 6 months straight.
Well, it's not true. You can have a spare laptop that you just put in the corner.
Yeah. It will
Probably burn down. Yeah. Yeah. And even then, I mean, I don't know how it works. I haven't used a cluster before, but can you say, hey, run this for 6 months?
Yeah, you could just like,
Okay.
I mean, at least in Bristol.
I mean, yeah, with these probabilistic models, you're not able to parallelize.
You can like sort of run stuff.
Yeah.
But in any case, it goes in the regular desktop.
Yes.
And so you're one day.
Yeah.
1,000 plus.
No, that was in a collab session, which is it was in a pro collab subscription, which is sort of like a $2,000 GPU.
Super. Any other question?
Thank you.
Okay, thanks.